hated, unseen. Somewhere beneath every major city on Earth, right now, a rat is moving through the dark, along a subway tunnel, behind a restaurant wall, under a sewer grate, completely invisible to the millions of humans walking directly above it. We've spent centuries trying to convince ourselves this animal doesn't matter, that it's vermin, background noise, a problem for the exterminator, not a subject for the history books. That's the biggest miscalculation in the story of human civilization. Because while humans were busy building empires out of stone, bronze, and steel, carving our names into monuments meant to outlast time itself, this animal was quietly building something else, a parallel empire, hidden inside the walls of our own. It didn't need armies. It didn't need flags. It simply moved into the infrastructure we built for ourselves and conquered the world from the inside out. Here's the claim this video is going to make, and it's stranger than it sounds. This animal helped determine which ancient cities thrived and which one collapsed into famine. It rode alongside every major trade network in the ancient world, spreading further and faster than any human explorer. It triggered a pandemic that erased a third of an entire continent's population, and in doing so, may have accidentally ended the feudal system and helped ignite the Renaissance. And today, this same animal has become so essential to modern science that it has personally contributed to some of the most important medical breakthroughs in human history. By the end of this video, you will realize that human history wasn't built by us. It was merely the habitat we constructed for them. To find the rat's true origin story, you have to go back to the exact same turning point that built the rest of human civilization, the agricultural revolution. Roughly 10,000 years ago, when early humans in the Fertile Crescent began cultivating and storing grain in concentrated surplus, they unknowingly created something that had never existed before in the natural world, a permanent, artificial, endlessly renewing food source, sitting in one fixed location all year round. For a highly adaptable, opportunistic omnivore like the rat, this wasn't just an opportunity. It was an evolutionary jackpot. Rats didn't need to be captured, bred, or invited. They simply followed the food, hitching a ride on the same agricultural revolution that allowed humans to stop wandering and start settling. Every new granary, every new grain store, every new permanent settlement was, from the rat's perspective, a fresh territory to colonize. In this sense, the rat became something we don't usually think to call it, the first illegal immigrant of the city-state, moving in without permission, exploiting resources meant for someone else, and settling in permanently long before any human authority had a way to stop it. And just like that, in the earliest cities of Mesopotamia, the very first urban civilizations in human history, a shadow population had already taken root. Every surplus human built to protect themselves from famine simultaneously became a resource the rat could exploit. Every wall built to keep out enemies was, to a rat, barely an inconvenience. This wasn't a footnote in the story of the first cities. It was baked into their foundation. Wherever humans built concentrated food surplus and permanent shelter, the two core ingredients of civilization itself, rats followed within a single generation. The city-state didn't just create farming, writing, and bureaucracy. It created the rat's first empire, too. But settling into the first cities was only the beginning. Because soon, this animal would stop merely following human civilization and start riding alongside it, all the way across the known world. As human trade networks expanded, so did the rat's reach, and nowhere was this truer than in the ancient world's most powerful engine of connectivity, the Roman Empire. Rome didn't just build roads. It built an interconnected shipping network stretching from Britain to Egypt, moving grain, wine, and goods across the entire Mediterranean. Every one of those ships, every one of those grain shipments, was also, almost without exception, carrying an uninvited passenger. Rats spread through Roman shipping lanes with extraordinary efficiency, colonizing port cities across the empire far faster than any deliberate human migration could have achieved. Every harbor Rome built to consolidate its power became, simultaneously, a new outpost in the rats' own expanding territory. Historians studying the archaeological record have found rat remains in ancient granaries and shipwrecks across the Roman world. Physical proof that this animal had, quite literally, ridden the empire's own infrastructure to conquer new ground. Centuries later, the same pattern repeated itself on an even larger scale. As the Silk Road connected China, Persia, and Europe through vast overland caravan networks, rats moved right alongside the silk, the spices, and the gold, hiding in grain sacks, textile bales, and supply carts stretching across thousands of miles of trade routes. In a very real sense, long before humans had any concept of a global network, the rat had already built one. Every caravan route, every shipping lane, every new port carved out by human ambition became another thread in what we might call the first global network. A hidden, parasitic infrastructure riding on top of humanity's own, moving faster and further than almost any individual human traveler of the era ever could. This wasn't a passive hitchhike. This was, whether by instinct or sheer evolutionary opportunism, one of the most successful colonization campaigns in the history of any species on Earth, and it was riding entirely on the back of human ambition. But this global network the rat had quietly built wasn't just going to move goods and grain forever. Soon, it would move something else. Something that would kill more human beings, in less time, than almost any war in recorded history. By the 14th century, the same trade networks that had made Europe prosperous, the ports, the caravans, the interconnected cities, had also become something far more dangerous. A perfectly engineered transmission system for catastrophe. In 1347, ships arriving in Sicilian ports carried more than just cargo. Hidden among the goods were rats infested with fleas carrying Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the Black Death. Within just a few years, this single pathogen, riding along the same rat-infested trade routes the rodent had spent over 1,000 years perfecting, killed an estimated 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's entire population. This wasn't simply a biological accident that happened to involve rats. Framed at the scale historians now understand it, the Black Death functioned as a demographic reset, a catastrophic, sudden contraction of the human population that reshaped the entire economic and political structure of an entire continent in the span of a few years. And here is where the story becomes genuinely subversive. Some historians argue the Black Death didn't just devastate medieval society. It may have inadvertently dismantled it, clearing the way for something new. With so much of the labor force wiped out, the rigid feudal system that had defined medieval Europe for centuries suddenly faced a labor shortage unlike anything in its history. Surviving peasants and workers, now in drastically higher demand, gained unprecedented leverage to demand better wages, more freedom of movement, and better living conditions. A shift many historians credit as a major contributing factor in the eventual collapse of the feudal system across much of Western Europe. And as the old social order crumbled, the redistribution of wealth and land that followed the plague is widely considered one of several critical conditions that helped set the stage for the Renaissance, an explosion of art, science, and humanist thought that reshaped the modern world. Read that back for a moment. An animal small enough to hide in a grain sack didn't just spread a disease. It may have quietly triggered the collapse of the medieval feudal order and helped clear the ground for one of the greatest cultural rebirths in human history. The rat didn't just survive the fall of the old world. In a very real sense, it toppled it. Centuries later, the rat hasn't disappeared. If anything, it has adapted more successfully to the modern world than almost any other mammal on the planet. Urban rats today display a level of behavioral intelligence that continues to surprise researchers. Problem-solving abilities, complex spatial memory of entire sewer and subway systems, and an almost eerie capacity to avoid traps and poisons that would have wiped out most other species within a few generations. All major pest control innovation humans have thrown at this animal over the last century, new poisons, new traps, new deterrents, has, over time, been met with rats that adapt, evade, or in some documented cases, develop genetic resistance to the very poisons designed to eliminate them. But here's the paradox this animal represents in the modern era. The same species we've spent millennia trying to eliminate has become one of the single most important tools in modern science. Laboratory rats and mice have contributed directly to research behind vaccines, cancer treatments, genetic studies, and neuroscience breakthroughs that have saved millions of human lives. Call it the laboratory paradox. An animal humanity has feared, poisoned, and mythologized as a symbol of disease and decay has simultaneously become one of our most trusted partners in extending human life itself. And that adaptability, the same trait that let this animal follow Neolithic farmers, stow away on Roman ships, and survive 1,000 years of human attempts at extermination, is exactly what makes it, arguably, one of the most successful mammals on Earth. Scientists estimate rat populations exist on every continent except Antarctica, thriving in nearly every environment humans have built, from the deepest subway tunnels to the tops of the tallest cities. We built poison. They evolved past it. We built traps. They learned to avoid them. In the long war between humans and rats, the scoreboard is far less one-sided than most people assume. So here we are, back in the alley we started in. Same rat, same shadows, same instinctive reaction. Most of us have to look away. But now you know what's actually been happening in those shadows for the last 10,000 years. We like to tell the story of human civilization as something we built ourselves, brick by brick, empire by empire, entirely on our own terms. But every granary we built to survive winter, every trade route we carved across continents, every city we packed with warm buildings and endless food, we were also, completely unintentionally, building something else. We didn't build civilization for humanity alone. We built a perfect, temperature-controlled, food-rich maze, and for 10,000 years, an animal we barely notice has been living inside it, thriving in it, and occasionally, catastrophically, reshaping it entirely. If this changed the way you look at the world, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.